I have taken a special interest in mental health from early on in my career. There was an incident in particular that I responded to involving a mentally ill individual who ultimately had killed his stepmother. And I was so disappointed to learn that his family had been trying to get him help. It was around the holidays and there weren't any spaces available to get him treatment. And as a result, I feel strongly that that led to this woman's death. And it was really disappointing to learn that there isn't enough help out there, and I don't think there still is enough help out there for folks that need it. But things I've learned is these type of calls, if it's a lesser extreme, require patience. Everybody needs to downshift, slow down, try to lose that urgency that is programmed into us to try to get through this call, get to the next one, because there's always more waiting. That is a pressure in law enforcement in just about any city. And so it takes a commitment from an organization to allow officers to slow down. Hey, they're going to be on this call for a little bit, and if there's other calls, if they've got a pend, they can pend. If we need mutual aid, we can do that, but these calls take time.
I was in law school in 1981 through 1983. The first year went well. I had already had my car accident. I had been on medication. I was on medication my first year, and then I went off, and my second year, and I began to have problems, and law school became impossible for me to negotiate. And so I was struggling, and I was struggling at my parents' house, and they eventually had enough of it because they wanted me to get help for mental illness. They wanted me to check myself into a mental health facility to get help because it was obvious to them I had a mental illness. It wasn't obvious to me, but everything kind of fit into the delusion, so I really believed it. And I thought that I could bring back Christ and the Garden of Eden. After about 6 months, I decided to push it to a head, so I stripped off all my clothes downtown Minneapolis at noon hour on the Skyway. And of course, nobody else did. That was my plan, that the whole world was gonna be part of this grand event, and that we would have the Garden of Eden, and where there would be no more sin, no more poverty. Everything would be just great. And of course, that didn't happen. And the police came and arrested me now. The first thing I said to the police is, you are the mafia, right? And you've come to kill me. Just go ahead and do it. Just go ahead. That's about how desperate I was. And when I got into the police car, the police officer looked back over his seat at me, because I was saying, what about Africa? What about all the wars? What about all the poverty? And he looked at me and said, boy, I think you're off your rocker. Somebody tells you you're off your rocker, usually that's not a compliment. It's something that people say, and they just throw that out there, and they're kind of trying to be mean about it, and they don't expect an answer. But just the way he said it, his honest opinion, and I detected some caring, like, come on, pal, get with the program, you're having trouble here. I think the highest value that somebody can have, the highest quality somebody can have as an officer, police officer, is honesty. This is the officer thinking, I'm feeling uncomfortable, you're making me uncomfortable, I don't know what to tell you. Just honest statements that they know that, something's a problem, or I really understand that you may believe this. I think they might have told me that. I think we probably got into my Garden of Eden story with the police officers. And they said, I really know you probably believe that, but it's not true. I don't feel your power. I don't follow you. I don't, all those kind of honest statements were helpful in helping me break my delusion. Until I broke my delusion, until I realized that I wasn't in control of other people, I was going to have problems. I think somebody in a mental illness, having a delusion, having an episode, is very unstable. They need to think that somebody else is stable. They need to think somebody else. If an officer gets as emotional as you are, it's a problem. They have to remain calm and direct and honest. They have to move slowly, not to scare somebody, they have to keep their cool. Basically, I'd say in a phrase, they have to keep their cool. Now, my mother was a mother bear. She made a lot of calls and she watched out for me, and she got me a mental health worker. And then they kind of coaxed me into trying to get into the mental health system rather than go through the criminal justice system. Because I believe to this day, if I had gone to the workhouse for my illness, I would have been a petty criminal for the rest of my life, probably homeless and have no kind of life. I look back at my life now, I have a job, I have a condominium, I have a church I go to, I have some friends. You know, I have a good life, really good life.
Since March of 2006, I've been hospitalized 18 different occasions. Diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder, you're either in a depression state or it can launch into mania. And most of my problems and hospitalizations have been due to incidents as related to the mania. Maybe 4 of those 18 or so were depression-based. I was on vacation and I was experiencing mania and had been missing for some time, and there was concern from my wife and family who I was with, and the law enforcement there didn't have the same skill sets they do here and in Minnesota. They found me simply, I was walking to where we were staying, and it was late at night, and but they came with a squad car up the sidewalk in front of me, another from behind me, and another individual came running from the side outside of these little bushes and trees that happened to be near the sidewalk that I was on. And he was all too willing to demonstrate to me that he had force over me, and was ready to utilize the equipment in his holster, and I don't think that'd calm anybody down. So I really believe that if there wouldn't have been the scene out of Hollywood, and it would have been more of a reasonable approach and come along my side and ask me some questions, I really believe that I had the ability to understand what was going on, and have willingly sought their recommendation or followed along to get help. I didn't need to be forced into it. My, I guess, advice to law enforcement personnel would be that less is more. At the times it went well, they understood the situation, they came along my side, they came to my level. I never, even as crazy as I might have been seeming at the time and out of things, delusional, I never lost sight that they had power and force and authority over me. But the more I understood that they didn't think they needed to use it at all, the better the situation went. So, and at the times that I had friends or family nearby and the law enforcement personnel took the time to consult with them and look to their insight as to what was going on and who I was, things went much better. You know, I'm just as normal as anybody else, and it's just the illness that's sometimes gotten out of control and driven behavior that's been alarming maybe in situations. But in wellness, I'm just like anyone else. The illness doesn't define who I am. I wish to make meaningful contributions. I desire to be accepted. I like to be warm and friendly, but sometimes the illness maybe manifests behaviors that don't project that, but deep inside, that's who I am, and the illness doesn't define me.
My chief has the saying, when you're on day one, your badge is as big as a shield like you used to see back in the day with warriors. And towards the end of your career, your badge, shrinks down to the size of maybe a quarter, because you realize that you don't need to always present that real tough macho side. It is something that I certainly did as a young officer. But I have learned over the years and through some of this CIT training that it's obviously not the ideal approach for when dealing with folks who are in crisis. The smaller you can then in effect make your badge, the better off you're going to be and more effective you are with folks who are truly in need of assistance. And that's a point where I've gotten to in my career where there's a time and a place for that, and it's generally not in the mental health calls that we deal with. But so yeah, my advice would be to try to be as compassionate as possible with these folks. Officer safety is always going to be an issue. You never let that go. It's always in the back of your mind, but it doesn't need to be always on the forefront of your mind to the extent where you can't just be able to go into a call and treat these people as humans, and if they're not presenting an immediate danger to you, you can continue to lower your level of officer presence and be more of an approachable type individual as opposed to somebody who's definitely showing a lot of force, if you will.